MTN is desperate to get out of the Iranian market after this massive blunder. Since the Iranian protests in January, during which the IRGC allegedly killed over 40,000 protesters, MTN and specifically MTN Irancell have been in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. Now, of course, this has resulted in a lot of anxiety for MTN as a South African company, as well as for not only the financial future of the company, but also the potential political implications of being linked to the Iranian regime. And it finally seems as if MTN is actually planning an escape route from its Iranian investment. Now, before we get into this latest development, could I please remind you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already? It's free to do, and all you've got to do is click on the subscribe button below the video. If you would like to enjoy additional benefits such as members-only videos, you can become a Power Club member. All you have to do is click on the join button below. Now let's get into this. So here we have an article from IntelliNews explaining how South Africa's MTN is looking to exit the Iran market. And as explained here, MTN Group, Africa's largest mobile operator by subscribers, said it would welcome any easing of tensions between the United States and Iran amid reports that diplomatic discussions could eventually pave the way for sanctions relief and potentially unlock the South African company's long-troubled investment in the country. Sanctions relief is among the issues under discussion between Washington and Tehran. Of course, this is referring to the Memorandum of Understanding between the US and Iran. Such a move could eventually allow MTN to exit Irancell, the mobile operator in Iran in which it owns a 49% stake. And this was according to My Broadband. What's important for us to note is this piece of background information, which is that MTN has actually been retreating from the Middle East since 2020, having already exited operations in Syria, Afghanistan, and Yemen. And so Iran remains its last major asset in the region. Years of US sanctions have effectively trapped MTN's investment, preventing the company from repatriating funds or disposing of its stake. Group Chief Executive Ralph Mupita previously described the investments as a frozen asset, with around 2.3 billion rand inaccessible because of US restrictions. Washington's sanctions on Tehran have been tightened repeatedly over the past 2 decades, with additional measures imposed in 2019 following attacks on Saudi oil facilities that the US blamed on Iran. Those restrictions further isolated Iran from the international financial system and limited the options available to foreign investors. Now, what's particularly important for us to understand is how the Israeli and American war on Iran has helped to accelerate the economic decline, not only of Iran, but of MTN Irancell as well, and then by extension, MTN. So, years of sanctions and economic instability have steadily eroded the value of MTN's Iran investment. Iran's economy has weakened sharply, particularly since 2025, which is of course when the 12-day war between Iran and Israel took place, with the rial losing substantial value amid tensions involving Iran, Israel, and the US, as we mentioned. MTN's latest results show that outstanding receivables from Iran fell to 2.8 billion rand, while its share of earnings from Irancell declined 32% year-on-year to 3.2 billion rand. And so let's just take that into account for a moment. A 32% earnings decline in just 1 year. Even if sanctions are eventually eased, years of inflation, currency depreciation, and economic instability may have significantly reduced the underlying value of the business. Sanctions have also restricted access to international banking channels and complicated the repatriation of profits, leaving MTN largely unable to realize value from one of its largest foreign investments. Analysts caution that sanctions relief would not necessarily translate into quick monetization of the stake, given exchange rate losses and the complexity of restoring international financial channels. So as we can see, MTN is significantly worried about its economic performance. Not only is the rial significantly deteriorating in value, but we've also seen how Iran's economy has been hit heavily by its recent wars. We've also seen how the US has frozen numerous assets and how a lot of MTN and MTN Irancell's own money cannot be accessed at this time. And so surely this financial crunch would actually result in MTN looking at itself and saying, well, perhaps it is time for us to exit from our last remaining Middle Eastern asset. However, I suspect that the reasons for MTN exiting the Iranian market do not just rest with the specific economic consequence, but it's also due to political reasons and management reasons as well. Starting off with the management side of things, it's important for us to remember that MTN owned a 49% stake in MTN Irancell, with the Iranian government holding the remaining stake. Now, as explained by Iran International over here, MTN Irancell failed to promptly enforce authorities' shutdown orders as demonstrations spread, Iranian media reported. And of course, the shutdown orders we're speaking about were when the Iranian government asked MTN Irancell to shut its internet service down in coordination with the broad countrywide internet blackout that happened earlier this year. And of course, this makes a lot of sense. Why? Because the Iranian regime would have wanted to hide from the world the horrors that unfolded over January 8th and January 9th, when tens of thousands of protesters were reportedly killed. Now, it explains here how Alireza Rafai was dismissed after about a year in the job because he disobeyed orders from security bodies and violated issued regulations under crisis conditions to restrict internet access during the uprising, IRGC-linked Fars news agency said. The move could signal defections at the most senior levels of the government, Mehdi Saremifar, a science and technology journalist, told Iran International. Iran cut off communications nationwide on January 8th without warning as calls intensified for anti-government protests across the country. While it was clear that riots were about to start, and despite a request by the Supreme National Security Council, why was the internet shut down with delay and at 10 p.m., Razai said. If some people had not refused, the losses and casualties would not have reached this level. So what we know from this is that the Iranian government was not happy with the chief executive actions and decided to fire him, and he was then replaced with an IRGC-linked replacement. Now, of course, this couldn't have felt too comfortable for MTN, because what they realized is that despite being a 49% stakeholder, they are still the minority, and so all of a sudden they realized that, hey, they do not have control over the company and its important executive decision-making. But beyond that, there's another important reason why MTN probably wants to exit Iran, and that is due to legal implications, specifically terror charges. You see, in the United States, there's a really important court case going on, and as it explains here in Legal Brief Africa, SA Telecoms Group MTN could find itself coughing up hundreds of millions of dollars to a group of US citizens who accuse the company of, wittingly or unwittingly, aiding terrorist attacks in Iran and Afghanistan. In court papers, the MTN Group and several other global telecommunications giants are being accused by a group of US citizens who are directly affected by the violence of sponsoring terrorist attacks in Afghanistan and Iran between 2011 and 2019. City Press reports that the case has reached the stage where the plaintiff and defendant agreed at the US District Court for the Eastern District of New York on the timelines to be considered when the case is heard. MTN has agreed to a timeline with which it will supply the legal representatives of the plaintiffs in the matter, represented by a team of international law firms, with information that would be used during litigation. The plaintiffs in the matter allege that companies, including the MTN Group and its subsidiary, MTN Dubai, violated the Anti-Terrorism Act and the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act by supporting terrorist activities, some of which claimed American lives. The MTN Group has been specifically highlighted for facilitating the operations of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in Iran and supporting the Taliban's campaign against US citizens in Afghanistan. The allegations stem from the fact that MTN is in a joint venture deal with an Iranian communications company whose technology has allegedly been used by the IRGC and the Taliban. In addition to this, I do want to make note that it is believed that MTN had actually paid the Taliban a certain amount of money, and in exchange, the Taliban would not target MTN infrastructure in Afghanistan during attacks. Now, of course, this could be viewed in two ways. In one way, this could be viewed almost like racketeering money, where somebody basically pays the mob, protection money, to ensure that the mob does not attack them and that nobody else attacks them either. On the other hand, it could be viewed as the funding of terrorism. Why? Because when you give money to the Taliban for no matter what reason, that money could be put towards terrorist activities. And so this is where this entire case seems to stem from. Overall, doing business in Iran seems to have inflicted massive damage on MTN. Not only is MTN Irancell's earnings going down by about 32% per annum, but we're also seeing how they struggle to access funds which have been frozen by the US thanks to sanctions. We've seen how the rial is severely underappreciated, and of course, the earnings that MTN is going down the tubes, especially as the Iranian economy continues to decline. And of course, it can't feel too good to know that you do not have majority control over your company and that the IRGC can effectively perform executive decisions at any given moment. Of course, there's then the US case, which I mentioned, and MTN, whether they are found guilty or innocent in this case, will surely not want to have a repeat of this case in the future. And by remaining in Iran, there is always that possibility that that could happen, particularly as wars reignite. Ultimately, it makes complete sense for MTN to exit Iran and to exit fast. Thank you very much for tuning into this video. If you found it interesting, please remember to subscribe to the channel for more content. Until next time, I'm Matthew Cohen, and this is the Power Pod.